To another Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast, where we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated assets, defer capital gains taxes, so you can create and preserve more wealth. Help your clients, friends, and family do the same. My name is Brett Swartz, and each and every episode, I'm joined by some of the best real estate, financial, wealth, and business minds in the world, where they share their ideas, deal stories, and inspiration. So together we can make complex tax deferral strategies simple and passive income plans achievable. I'm excited about our next guest. He's out of the great state of Utah. He is a CMA, a CSCA, a CIA, a CFE, MSFA, all kinds of really cool stuff. But basically what he's done is he's provided management and accounting for around 50 small businesses, designing accounting processes, building financial dashboards, creating forecasts, and providing other related services to drive profitability for his clients. He has a master's degree in forensic accounting, certified management accountant, and these are all the different things for that. So he's a whiz with numbers, okay? And we're going to be talking about finding a fractional CFO and getting some insights from an accounting expert. Please welcome to the show with me, Nate Jenson. Nate, how are we doing?
I am great, Brett. Thanks for having me on your show.
Absolutely. For our listeners getting to know you for the first time, would you give us a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Sure. Yeah. I started as an entrepreneur when I was about 22, 23 years old, started a window cleaning business. Within about 2.5 years, drove it into the ground. Not a great experience, but it was such a great learning experience. And the bit of irony is one of the main issues I had with that business was I had some accounting problems. My accounts receivable got all messed up, couldn't collect my money, and eventually it just was not worth continuing. Fast forward several years, I got into accounting, which was never my original intention, but it just sort of clicked for me. And started with a bookkeeping business, grew it to a controllership business, grew it to a CFO business. Sold my first one in 2015. I actually sold another business just about 1.5 years ago, a much bigger business at that point. And so now I'm focused on just that CFO piece. I don't do any of the bookkeeping or anything like that. But I help my clients understand what's driving their profitability, or perhaps what's restraining their profitability. And we look at changes that they need to make to improve that, to scale their business, to be able to grow their profit without having to spend more time as an owner to make that happen.
Excellent. And you can learn more about Nate Jenson by going to 02cfo.com. And it's the word two spelled out, and it's the word zero spelled out. So 02cfo.com. So Nate, before we dive into everything we're talking about here, which is finding a fractional CFO and just some insights from an accounting expert like yourself, I want to take one other step back. And I believe you've all been given certain gifts in this life, and these gifts have been given us to be blessing and help to others. I'm curious, what would you say is your one or two, superpower gift that you were given, and how does it help how you help and bless people today?
Wow, that's a question that maybe goes way outside the professional, which is fine. Honestly, Brett, I love seeing people succeed, and that may sound trite to some people. I've been blessed with a lot of good things in my life. I frequently think about living where I live, growing up where I grew up, and if you look at what's going on in the world today, I mean, I can say for myself, I live in a place of such peace and prosperity. There's so much opportunity that to try and sort of hold on to that, too tightly seems a little selfish. And so I'm in a very secure space myself, and I just love the opportunity to talk with others and see what they're doing, to give them, some insights maybe that I can based on my experience. I'll frequently have friends call me up and say, Nate, I'm thinking about starting a business. Can we go to lunch? And we'll just talk through some basic things, right? Like, hey, what's my break even to get started? What's maybe some good marketing ideas? I'm not a marketing expert, but I've been around a little while. And so that'd be my first thing. It's just, I think just the willingness or even the desire to sit down with someone, understand where they're coming from, and give them a little bit of some kind of push if I can help them upwards.
Awesome. Cool. Now let's dive right into the topic at hand, which is finding a fractional CFO and some insights from an accounting expert like yourself. So what would you say, Nate, is the number one secret to finding a fractional CFO?
I'd say that's easy. You've got to understand the kind of CFO that you're looking for. I typically will categorize CFO services into three different categories. One is if you're a public company or trying to go public, you're going to want someone who's very good at that side of things, right? The regulatory, that understands the rules. They've got to fill out the forms. They've got to make sure that they're right as far as the SEC goes. And so that's one kind. The second kind is someone who's growing their business, hopefully through like funding, right? Doing your first round or with angel investors or whatever. There's some CFOs that are very good at that kind of service, where they have connections, or they just have the expertise to help you raise that kind of capital. And then the third kind, which is the kind that I specialize in, is just profitability and analysis. I'm sort of that strategic partner, that internal partner who says, here's all the numbers, here's what they mean, and then here's what it tells us about how we can run our business better. So for me, that's the first thing, is understanding which of those three types that you're looking for. What kind of help do you need?
Yeah, got it. That makes sense. Yeah, and so let's focus on the third one, right? Which is going to be the majority of people who are listening to this, right? They have businesses they're running, or they're starting a business. They have real estate businesses they're running, or investments that they're making, and they're really going to want to understand their profitability and analyze that. So, what's the number one secret to making sure on that third one that what would be the steps? So what does that look like when you're working with potential customers, clients of yours?
So for me, there's a few things. One is the first thing I'll do with a client is I'll sit down, I'll either help them understand, or they'll help me understand what are the most important metrics for their business and their industry. So for example, if you're a restaurant, you might want to know how frequently you turn your tables over, right? Like how many tickets do you have in a month? Which for a construction company, completely different metrics. So that's the first thing, is understanding what are the numbers that drive your profitability. Second thing is you've got to have targets for each of those. You need to either look at what that number used to be, or again, based on perhaps industry standards, what that number should be. And then the third thing is obviously measure the actuals each month against that target. So for example, if you are a construction company and your utilization rate, like how much work you're actually getting out of your employees, if your target is 75% and your actual is 60%, well, then it's very easy to see that you've got a problem with how efficiently your employees are working. On the other hand, if you're hitting that 75 or 80%, but you're still not hitting your profit targets, you've got to be able to see what other metrics perhaps are, that you're not hitting those targets. And that's going to tell you where to focus. So with those three things, kind of wrapped up in those three things, for me, and this is sort of where I specialize, is you've got to have a simple way of looking at those numbers. Most business owners don't have hours and hours every month to go through their financial statements. And so I focus on building dashboards for my clients where they can see, here's the numbers that matter. Here's where our target is. Here's where our actual is. Is it above or below what our target is? And it's very easy to see what where you need to work on in your business.
Got it. All right. So we're talking about Nate Jenson, 02cfo.com, 02cfo.com, all spelled out, no numbers, 02cfo.com. So it really sounds like you're doing sort of like an X-ray or an MRI once a month on the numbers, and being able to diagnose what might be going well, what might not be going as well, and ways to improve. Is that a fair summary so far, Nate?
For the most part, I would just correct one thing. It's not necessarily just a monthly review. I've got clients that look at their dashboard really every couple of days, because depending on the dashboard, some of them look at it for cash flow purposes. And a lot of times cash flow, that's going to kill your business faster than a profit problem. So it doesn't have to be just monthly. Sometimes, weekly or more frequently is just as relevant.
Perfect. So what's the number two secret to once you've established, targets, established, what drives the metrics that are driving it, and then you'll be able to measure this and see this. What's the next secret to finding a good fractional CFO?
So, I guess to clarify your question, you're talking about finding one, or what's the next step
Well,
after
I
we
guess
do
would
this?
be, or I guess not just finding one. You're finding one who can understand how to do that, of course, right? I guess the best one would be implementing, the systems and the processes and the relationship, and like what does that look like on a day, like kind of what you're talking about. What's the next part of that process? Like once that's all set up, you have the dashboard, you've clarified your metrics, you've clarified your targets, you're starting to measure that, and is it just continuing to improve those? Is that kind of how that would work, or what do
So,
you do
well,
there? Those
yeah.
margins.
So honestly, the next thing I see that where most business owners struggle is systematizing that process. So, because a lot of people don't love accounting, don't always love looking at their numbers, it's something that they hope that they can just kind of throw some money at it and then get back to what they were really doing, right? What they felt was really important, sales or whatever they focus on. And so the next thing would be you've got to do one of two things. You've either got to set aside time, again, whether it's weekly or monthly or whatever, that you say, I'm blocking out time on my calendar where I'm actually going to look at this and I'm going to analyze it. And if I have an executive team, I'm going to go through it with my executive team and we're going to talk about what decisions have to be made based on these numbers. The other part of that is if you want, because the way I run my business, I let people either they can just kind of have the dashboard and run with it, or they can have me as their fractional CFO. And so if you can't set aside time specifically to look at your dashboard on a regular basis, the other option would be to have me or someone like me who I'm going to set aside time periodically to look at that. And then I'm going to, set up a meeting with you as the owner and say, hey, here's what I'm seeing. And here's what we need to talk about to make sure that you stay, profitable. So that's the biggest pitfall is people, they'll set it up and they'll say, okay, we spent money on that. Now we can get back to work. But no, you've got to take time as a business owner, whether it's with me or with someone else or just by yourself, looking at those numbers, because that's where your strategic decisions come from, right? You can't just say, hey, I've got reports or I've got a dashboard. It should be taken care of. You've actually got to use it to make changes in your business.
And I think that's the key, right? It's I heard Mr. Mark Cuban say entrepreneurs tend to lie to themselves, right? And you got to be careful not to lie to yourself about what's really going on with the numbers and what's happening. And so, talk about the mindset when it comes to working with entrepreneurs that perhaps are more sales, more marketing, more focused on that, and not necessarily more the visionary, right, versus the data. Talk about the best ones that you do work with, and how they shift their mindset when working with you, Nate.
I'm going to juxtapose maybe one of the worst ones that I've worked with versus one of the best ones. When I was honestly fairly new at this, it was probably over 15 years ago now. I was really excited. I started with a new company. I wanted to come in and analyze their stuff and show them how much I knew and how smart I was. And I took their numbers. They sold a product through different sales channels. Some was retail, some was wholesale, some was OEM. And their retail channel consistently underperformed compared to their other channels. And so I did an analysis and I came up with the result that if they just divested, and in fact, not even divested, just stopped doing their retail channel and they got rid of the resources they were committing to that, they would make about $4,000 more per month. And the owner, seeing that, basically said, well, I think it'll turn around one day. I like it. I want to keep doing it. My opinion, it was sort of his baby, right? It was his product. It was his first sort of the way he started selling his product. And emotionally, he was not really willing to let it go. And I was with that company for several years. And for at least 3 years, they continued to lose money on that particular sales channel every single month. That was very frustrating for me because, again, I had the information, I had the data. Maybe I could have presented it differently, but they never made that change, which would have led to more profit. Compare that to one of the more recent clients that I've had, who, when they brought me in, they said, Nate, we don't know anything about accounting. We need you to tell us not just like what we don't know, but we need you to tell us what questions we should be asking. And they were super humble, super interested in what the data was actually telling them. Their ego was not wrapped up in, doing it their way or, kind of making sure that they felt they were the smartest guys in the room. They were very upfront. Nate, just tell us what we don't know, because there's a lot that we recognize we don't know. And I've actually worked with them for a few years now, and it's so great. They look at their numbers and they ask me very good questions. And in fact, over the time we've worked together, I would say they've even improved my skills simply because they would come up with questions that I hadn't thought to ask. And I thought, oh, I better go and add this to your dashboard because that is something we need to know consistently. I don't know how to change that in somebody. I think someone, they either choose to be humble and look for those insights, or they get to a point, I think, where they're kind of compelled to be humble because they don't have any more options and they need the help. So that's, for me, that's the mindset. It's just someone who says, hey, I'm great at sales, or I'm great at, whatever this part of my business, but I'm hiring a CFO because there are things I don't know that I need somebody else's insight who does know, who is an expert in this piece of the business.
Nate, I absolutely love what you just said there, and I couldn't agree with you more. And it's about having a humble, approach to not knowing what you don't know, right? And being willing to hire the who, not be the how, right? As well, I think that's
Right.
next book right there. You could write a whole
That
book
sounds
if you
good.
haven't already wrote the book on that. And it's tough because emotionally, you're right. Entrepreneurs do get caught up in the way that they've done things, and but the same ideas that took you from 0 to a million or a million to 10 million aren't the same ideas and strategies going to take you from 10 to 50 or 50 to 100 million or 100 million to $1 billion, right? And so hiring that who's been there and who can help you take that next step is the key, and not getting out of your own way. Imagine, I makes you think of the Shark Tank. People come on Shark Tank, right? And you see them come on, and they have the baby, they have the emotional connection, they have a passion for what they're doing. They can start asking about the numbers, and very quickly the sharks determine whether this is going to be a decently, viable business, or if they're ready to invest, or whatever. They kind of diagnose it pretty quickly. But with the numbers, they don't, diagnose it really, really quickly. And the people who don't know their numbers or aren't being honest about what their numbers mean, right? The strategic decisions about them. I think that's what the sharks are looking for. Like, A, is it viable? Is it a good product? Is it solving a problem? B, do we think we can make money on this? But then C, what are the decisions that the entrepreneurs are making with the numbers? So talk about just that, how you coach people to make strategic, great decisions with the numbers.
So I think the thing that helps there the most is the financial dashboard. I actually use a couple different platforms, sometimes multiple platforms for the same client, depending on what they need. And I think what helps the most is for them to be able to see it, right? If I'm showing somebody their P&L, let's say it's a 12-month P&L, we've got, a column for every month. We've got, 30 rows of data, which has various kinds of income, various kinds of cost of goods sold, various kinds of expenses. Most people can't digest that, right? Especially like even as an accountant, by trade, I've got to take the time to sit down and like read through line by line to understand what that's telling me. But by putting it in a dashboard where it's visual, it's the old adage that a picture's worth 1,000 words. Someone can very clearly see, okay, here's my target. There's like a dashed line or a dotted line going across, and then here's my actual. There's a bar graph coming up. Is it touching that line? Is it below that line? Is it above that line? And to be able to see it like that, it tells such a different story than just a whole bunch of data on a page. When someone sees it, again, sort of visually, one, I think it helps them connect better with the numbers. When they say, hey, sales is an easy one to look at, right? Our sales goal is, $1 million for this year. For this month. And we're at 800,000. And the next month we're at 800,000. The next month we're at 825. Well, it's very clear to see that there's a trend that you're not hitting your goals. And so I think that sort of forces you to be honest. You can't look at that graph and say, well, it's close enough. I'm sure we're fine. It doesn't matter. By seeing that you're consistently below a target, you either have to face that you're not performing the way you intend to, the way you hope to, or you're in denial. But it's much easier to look at a report full of a bunch of numbers and say, I'm just not going to take the time to interpret it, to understand it, versus looking at a picture and saying, I can't deny what I'm seeing. It's very clear. So for me, it's that connection, that visual connection, because it's not just looking at a graph and saying, oh, we hit our number or we didn't hit our number. It's saying, if we didn't hit our number, we've now got to drill down and understand why. Okay. Sales is maybe a simplistic one, but you're looking at, again, employee utilization rates, or a target I like to use called gross profit metrics, where we look at categories of expenses as a percentage of gross profit. If we have all those if we have all those metrics and we're consistently missing on one of those targets, we have to drill down. But it's very easy to say, okay, your problem is, let's say your compensation as a percentage of gross profit every month is consistently too high. Depending on your industry, one I know pretty well, I'm just going to use an example. Your target should be 55%. Your compensation should be 55% of gross profit. If you're consistently at 65%, 70%, 65%, 70%, back and forth month over month, we know our compensation is too high as a percentage of gross profit. That being the case, we've either got to raise our gross profit or reduce our compensation. And there's a lot of different ways we can look at that. We've got to start looking at maybe profitability by client to find out if there are certain clients that are keeping our gross profit too low in the first place. But if every client is pretty efficient, or that each client relationship is pretty profitable, we then know that we have a compensation issue where we're overpaying compared to the industry, and we've got to figure out why. And that's okay if it's a short-term strategic decision. But if year after year you're overcompensating your people compared to the industry, then you're either choosing to not make as much money as you could, deliberately saying we're just going to overpay, or you're just not willing to take action to fix that.
Very well said. Wow, we're talking with Nate Jenson, 02cfo.com, 02cfo.com. I like the way you put that. The visual is going to connect, right? The data, it's going to simplify it. What is it? Our brains can process so much at one time. There's so many things that are vying for our attention. And the one thing that should definitely be vying for our attention as we're business owners, entrepreneurs, owning real estate, owning and having investments, is the numbers, right? And this is so important. So yes, Nate, what questions haven't I asked you, right, that I should be asking you? I'm going to practice what your other clients have done.
Very good. Very good. Honestly, I think, gosh, what haven't you asked me? We haven't gotten into very much specifics. Let's talk about real estate for a second. If you own, so I actually own a couple of rental properties myself. If you own 2 rental properties, honestly, a dashboard might be overkill, right? You've got like 2 rent payments a month, generally not a lot of expenses. But if you own a business where, for me, by the time someone gets to about 5 employees, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. I found that at about 5 employees, you usually have enough complexity that you are no longer connected to what's really driving profitability, right? If you start a business out of your garage and it's you, or you and maybe your spouse or your brother-in-law or whatever, and you're both just kind of working, that's, you're committing your time to try and drive a profit as you're getting started, and that's fine. There's not a whole lot to analyze there usually. But if you've hired 2 or 3 more people, so there's 5 of you now, you've usually got multiple clients, and you start to you're not able to keep in your head where everybody's time is committed, where your other resources, money resources, are committed as far as which clients they're serving or which products they're serving. And so I think it's important to understand, and I know this isn't a question, but it's important to understand at what point you've sort of lost control. I'll give you an example, or a metaphor, I suppose. If you play the game of chess, there's 64 squares on the board, there's 32 pieces, and most of us run our businesses as if we're playing a game of chess while we're wearing a blindfold. And someone tells us what our opponent does, and then we tell them what our move is, and we're trying to keep track of all these 32 pieces moving across the board and how they all interact with each other. And 2 or 3 moves in, maybe you can do it. Most of us, by the time you're 4 or 5 moves in, you've lost it. You have no idea where the pieces are, how they interact with each other. And so same idea in business. You've got to take off that blindfold. And the only way I know how to do that is to connect somebody back with their numbers and show them, how do your numbers on a day-to-day basis or weekly basis or monthly basis actually affect your profitability and the money that you get to bring home and keep in your pocket.
Hey, absolutely loving all of it. I think this is great. This is great insights from an accounting expert, Nate Jenson. We're talking about finding a fractional CFO and really just, implementing a CFO into your business, right? Being it yourself or hiring somebody or finding a fractional one like Nate to be a part of it, to help you grow, help you scale, help you clarify your numbers in a really clear way. So you're making these strategic decisions with wisdom and clarity. So Nate, if someone wants to work with you, what's it look like? I don't know if you want to mention cost here, or maybe it all kind of depends, but what's kind of the next steps if someone's like, yeah, wow, I really would like an opportunity to connect with Nate, work with Nate. What does it look like?
Okay, thanks for that. That's actually a great question. I'll talk about cost a little bit, not super specifically. My focus, Brett, is I want to be affordable. Uh, I do work with a lot of small businesses who they're not sure if they need a CFO or a controller, or really what's the difference, or how do they know when they need to get a CFO? And what I found was, as I worked with a lot of clients in my business that I sold a couple of years ago, uh, I would build a dashboard, and I would meet them at least monthly to go through that dashboard. And depending on the client, and again, how complex they are, and how how much change had to be affected in their business to become profitable or more profitable. Some of them, after just 3 or 4 months, and maybe even less than that, they were actually good with the dashboard. And I felt like, as I kept meeting with them, uh, I almost felt like I was overcharging. Like, are you getting value out of this? Like, the numbers are all here in your dashboard. Can't you just read it? And some certainly could. And so the model that I use now is, there's two options. People can, sign up with me as their fractional CFO. I'll come and build the dashboard. I'll meet with them again at least monthly to go through it and interpret it, and help them make those strategic changes. Second option is, I build the dashboard. We meet first, and we come up with the metrics that matter and the targets for those metrics. But I build the dashboard. I review it with them. We revise it. I show them how to use it, how to interpret it, and then really just for a few $100s a month, they have that dashboard ongoing, and then they can come back to me for like an hourly fee if they need it, if they need help. But if they can look at it and read it, it's very inexpensive to just have that data in front of you all the time. And then again, pulling me in as they need to. So that's it in a nutshell. We meet not briefly. We meet to get it set up in either case. We go through what metrics matter, what those targets are. We set up how the dashboard functions and how it flows, what to do with it. And then again, they can have it kind of on their own and pull me in as needed, or they can have me as a regular CFO, a fractional CFO, where I'm overseeing not just the dashboard, but some of their accounting functions as well.
Awesome. Nate Jenson with fractional with 02CFO.com, talking about fractional CFO and his services there. Nate, we're running out of time. You ready for the lightning round?
I hope so.
All right. Knowing what you know now, if you could go back to your 25-year-old self, what's the one golden nugget, make sure you tell yourself to do?
Stick with it. Yeah, I just.
Question number.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. You can expand.
I had several businesses, and I failed the first few of them, and I would do it, and I would be like, I've got to run back and get a job, and it's not that that's a bad thing to go get a job, but I had moments where I'm like, I'm never going to start a business again because it was too painful to fail. And I just would have said, no, you're going to start it again. Just keep that in mind. And it's just a setback. So stick with it.
Awesome. What's the number one book you've recommended or gifted most in the past year?
Oh, shoot. In the past year, one I can reread again and again is The 4-Hour Workweek. I love efficiency. I love automation. That book is a little bit dated now, but it keeps top of mind to run efficient, which is a scalable principle.
Awesome. Question number 3. What are you most curious about right now?
What am I most curious about? Oh, shoot. I think cultures, honestly. I love different cultures. I love travel, and I love going to a culture where I don't speak the language and I don't understand the food, and might get a little bit lost sometimes.
Cool. Next question. What's your number one way you're using ChatGPT?
Actually, I use it to help me with my dashboards. There's a lot of programming that goes into these, and sometimes I can't get a formula to work, even though I think it's right. And I'll plug it in and say, "What's wrong with this?" And they say, "Hey, you're missing a comma here or something." And that's fixed.
It's nice. Love that. Favorite leadership quote or theme that you strive to live by?
There's one. I don't know if that's a leadership quote. It's actually Shakespeare in his play Coriolanus. A very simple phrase. She says, "In this business, action is eloquence."
I like it. I'll think about that one. Next question, or last question. After all your success, helping all the people you've helped, what's the number one way that you stay centered in your values and stay courage to charge forward to reach even higher heights?
Boy, to stay centered in my values, I'm very religious. So I read scripture. I spend time with my family doing religious things, religious activities.
Awesome. Nate, I want to thank you for being on the show. I want to thank you for sharing your wisdom with us. I know we're all better for it. I want to encourage you to keep using your gifts and talents of really caring and helping people, right? Like you said before, and loving people seeing succeed with their numbers, right? Especially the numbers. This is so cool. For our listeners who want to get in touch with you, would you remind them one last time what's the best place for them to find you?
Best place is the website, zerotocfo.com, zerotocfo.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Nate. I also want to thank our listeners for listening to another episode of the Capital Gains Tax Solutions podcast. As always, we believe most high net worth individuals and those who help them, they struggle with clarifying their capital gains tax deferral options. Not having a clear plan is the enemy, and using a proven tax deferral strategy such as the deferred sales trust is an amazing way for you to exit highly appreciated cryptocurrency, business, real estate, defer hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars in capital gains tax. So you can create and preserve more wealth. And getting with someone like Nate Jenson so you can clarify your numbers. You can make strategic, great decisions. Every number counts. Make sure you are, either hiring a Nate or becoming the Nate, right? If that's what it is for you and your business, because you got to know your numbers. That being said, I appreciate everyone watching or listening, and we'll talk to everyone again real soon.